time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. You'd think if you're hosting a party at your new place, the least you could do is remember to invite the person who's been supporting your husband. Today in the rLounge, a daughter-in-law confuses the term housewarming with house chilling. Daughter-in-law banned me from the housewarming party because of my Facescar. I got back what was mine, the house. I, 63 female, have been dealing with all sorts of curveballs life has thrown at me, but now it seems just too much to handle. My daughter-in-law, let's call her Susan, is hosting a party at the new house, and I'm not even invited to it. I got to know this from my niece who follows Susan on Facebook. My niece called to tell me that she was upset about not being invited. I was puzzled. Like, what invitation and what party? She was shocked that I knew nothing about a grand party Susan was throwing at the new house. I asked her if she was sure that it was a housewarming party. Perhaps it could be something else. Then she sent me the screenshot of the story Susan has put up with the decoration stating, "Happy Home. 1 week to go for the celebration. Can't wait to give a house tour." All these stories pretty much summed it up. The naive me thought perhaps they forgot to invite me. Not that the inner me didn't know the truth, but sometimes this hope makes you do stupid things. I waited eagerly for my invitation, but it never came. I tried to stay patient, thinking maybe it got lost in the mail or that they were planning to invite me in person. The party is tomorrow, and how could it not occur to them that I wasn't on the guest list? Today morning, I called my son, let's call him Mark, to ask about it. He seemed uncomfortable, stammering that it must have been a mix-up and that he thought Susan had invited me. I said, "No, I didn't get any invite." He said Susan has been very busy these days, commuting for work, driving the kids to school and other classes, and then supervising the renovation of the house. He told me not to worry and that he would check with Susan to get back. It was clear he was lying, or at least covering for her, because, hello, it takes 10 seconds to forward an invitation. I waited all afternoon, but no calls, no texts. It's certain that I'm not invited. It may sound very trivial to some of you, and I don't want to counter that. I have the right to be upset about it. My life's journey has been filled with challenges, but I've always managed to persevere. However, there are certain moments that break me into pieces, and this is one of them. Probably a little background would help. My husband, my rock, was my biggest supporter and partner in everything. When he passed away, he left me with a substantial wealth, the house, pretty huge insurance money, and some other savings here and there. He ensured I'd be okay after he was gone. Surprisingly, he left nothing for Mark. He mentioned in his will that he deliberately left everything to me, and then it would be on me to decide what to do with it. Mark was very upset about this, but I ensured to have his back. He's my only son. Since then, I've always supported him in every way I can. Mark has always been a very good kid, though he's had his share of struggles. He's the type of person who's kind-hearted but not always practical, which has sometimes led him into difficult financial situations. There were so many times when my husband bailed him out, and maybe that was the reason he didn't give him everything outrightly. When he married Susan, I was happy for him. He seemed genuinely in love, and I wanted him nothing more than to see him happy. But soon after marrying her, he became distant from us. I didn't mind it much and respected his boundaries. From the very beginning, there was something off about Susan. It wasn't that she was openly rude or hostile. It was more subtle than that. There was a coldness in her that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was polite, but it felt like there was a wall between us that I could never break through. At first, I thought it was just the natural awkwardness that sometimes happens when families blend. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I tried to be friendly, tried to involve her in family activities, but she always kept her distance. Then came the accident. A few years ago, I was driving home from somewhere when a drunk driver swerved into my lane. The impact was severe, and I was left with a large scar on the left side of my face. It wasn't just any scar. It was jagged and noticeable, something that surgery couldn't fully fix. I remember looking at myself in the mirror the first time after the bandages came off, and I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. It was a difficult adjustment, but over time, I learned to accept it. I knew that my worth wasn't defined by my appearance, even if the world sometimes tried to convince me otherwise. However, it quickly became apparent that Susan couldn't accept it. After the accident, her already chilly demeanor grew even colder. She would make excuses not to visit, claiming she was busy with work and that the kids had activities. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out exactly what it was. Maybe I was too optimistic, hoping that whatever was bothering her would eventually fade away. Sadly, that never happened. However, that never deterred me from standing up for Mark whenever he needed me. I expected the same cordial, if not loving, relationship from them. Guess it doesn't work that way with parents. Children always want you to have their back, but you cannot expect anything from them without being called nosy and needy. Sometimes I miss my husband a lot. When he was here, I didn't need anyone. We both were enough for each other. I hope I get over this bitter feeling soon. Thanks if you have read this in full. I'm sorry, OP. Despite all the pain you've been through, from the accident to adjusting to a new reality, you've always been there for Mark. Yet here you are, OP, facing the ultimate snub, and it seems the only people who truly appreciate your efforts are your niece and your own sense of humor about the situation. Maybe next time, you'll be the one throwing a party and intentionally forgetting to invite those who've perfected the art of exclusion. You know who's scarier than a Facescar? Someone like Susan. Update 1. Thanks for the overwhelming response. I didn't expect it to blow up. I mean, who would want to read a sobby story of an old woman? Looks like there are a lot of men, going through a similar emotional turmoil. Thanks a ton for making me feel better with your comments. However, there were some people belittling my feelings that it was no big deal, their house and their choice. Sorry, folks, it's not their house. It's my house. I bought it for them. Let me fill in some more details. Guess I should have added it in my first post. Didn't know how some people like to dig so much. Also, some people picked on me for daughter-in-law's name being Susan. Well, I used a fake name. My son's name is also not Mark. I have the right to protect my identity, don't I? That's why I'm writing on Reddit and not making a social media post. Phew. So, Mark and Susan have been struggling financially for a very long time. Like I said, Mark made some stupid financial decision that made a hole in his pocket. I helped him whenever he had a big purchase to make. The list would be endless. While all that was fine, I realized that their biggest chunk of money goes for rent. They were living in a tiny, cramped apartment in the city with their 2 kids, barely making ends meet. Mark was working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and Susan was doing what she could to contribute, but it was clear they were drowning. My husband's inheritance was sitting in the bank, untouched. I still have a job at the city library, which is enough to pay my bills. I also have my own savings. My husband left me a house, so the rent is sorted. I thought, why not use my husband's money for something good? Why not give them a home where they can feel secure and start building a future? So, I bought a house for them in the suburbs. It isn't a mansion by any means, but it's a beautiful, comfortable home in a nice neighborhood. It has 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a backyard. I thought it was perfect for them. When I broke the news to them, they both were in tears. Mark hugged me tightly, thanking me over and over. Susan, on the other hand, was a bit more restrained in her gratitude. She smiled and said the right words, but there was something in her eyes that made me feel uneasy. Still, I brushed it off. I don't need her validation, do I? The house needed a renovation. The previous owner was an old couple who didn't or couldn't keep up with the maintenance. I asked Mark to give me some more time so that I could get everything fixed before they moved in. He said they wanted to move in right away and use the rent money to renovate the new house. Fair enough. I gave them the keys. After they moved in, I wanted to visit a few times to see how things were settling in, but each time, Susan had an excuse for why I couldn't come by. Either the house was a mess, or the kids were sick, or she was just too tired. I didn't push it, thinking that maybe she just needed time to adjust. But as weeks turned into months, I started to feel like I was being deliberately kept away. I'd ask Mark about it, but he'd just shrug and say that Susan was stressed with the move and that I should give her some space. Her workplace was 45 minutes drive from the house. She isn't used to living so far from the office. Well, there were some perks to living in the city heartland. Your choice. Mark occasionally sent me a few pictures of the new interiors. Not to mention, he asked me to cover some of those expenses because, it's too much to bear. However, when I wanted to come over to see it myself, his wife would be caught up with something or the other. Honestly, I wasn't bothered as much as I might have sounded because I have a busy life, working as a librarian, participating in community service, and traveling all over for the cause. So most of the family drama, I let it pass. But then I got the news of the housewarming party and I couldn't swallow it. Mark never called me back. Then, the next day, I saw photos of the party on social media. They had hosted a big event with friends, Susan's relatives, and even some of Mark's old colleagues. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. Everyone except me, because I hadn't been invited. I was hurt. I wanted to do something about it. Enough of being the pushover, but I'm not someone who would show up at the party and poop over. I don't find it classy. Sorry. I knew Mark and Susan would give me enough opportunities to avenge my heartbreak. Bingo. It came sooner than I expected. Mark called me for handouts. Why? Apparently his lovely wife burnt up the month's expenses and maxed out both of their credit cards on the party. Now they don't have any money to sail through the month. Well done, I asked. What can I do about it? He remained silent and said, you know. I said, sorry, I don't know. What do you want me to do with this information? He fell short of words. My dear boy isn't used to this kind of cold treatment. He stammered, nothing. Called to fill you up. I said, yes, you have. Now I've got to go. Bye. The next day he texted me, Mom, I know you were mad at us for not inviting you to the party. I'm sorry, Mom. It just slipped our minds. I know you called me to talk about it, but there was just too much going on, and I totally am missing calling you back. We can have another gathering next month with you, Aunt Lily, Uncle Fred, and Alicia. Hope to see your response. Lily and Fred are my siblings, and Alicia is my niece who informed me about the party. So now they want to throw bones at me and my family in order to get the ATM running. Sorry, honey, the ATM is shut now. I ignored it. He called me in the evening asking, Hey, Mom, are you okay? I didn't hear back from you. I was kind of worried about your health. I could sense the desperation in his voice. I chuckled and asked him, what do you want? He thought he won. He laughed and said he wanted some money to pay the bills. I said I don't have any right now. He seemed shocked because he didn't expect a no to be an answer. I said, well, get used to it, and hung up. I ignored his calls and texts for the entire week. He understood he had messed up big time. He texted me that this Sunday he would visit me with the kids. I'm sure he would want to use his children to emotionally manipulate me, but he doesn't know me yet. Well, let's see how it goes. I'll update. Thanks for reading. It's not every day you hear about someone buying a house for their son and daughter-in-law, only to be kept away like a leper at the feast. And the cherry on top? The epic showdown of, Mom, we spent all your money on a party and now we need more. Nothing says gratitude quite like maxing out credit cards on a bash while your benefactor is left out in the cold. If only they were as good at remembering their manners as they are at remembering to hit you up for cash. Thankfully, you shut the ATM down. I bet they're rethinking their strategy, realizing that at the housewarming wasn't just a new beginning for them, but a lesson in how not to manage family relationships. Update 2. I'm going through waves of emotions. One day I feel strong and savage, and then my loved ones shatter me, and I go back to feeling miserable. So, Mark and Susan arrived with the kids on Sunday. When the kids headed to the backyard to play, Mark initiated the discussion over the financial crisis. I shot them on point blank. What was the reason for not inviting me to the party? No BS, please. They were taken aback. Mark stammered for an answer, but I wanted to hear from Susan. She didn't even try to hide the truth. She looked at me with that same cold stare and told me flat out that she didn't invite me because she didn't want me there. I was stunned. I asked her why, and she replied with something that made my blood run cold. She said, I didn't want the embarrassment. I was so taken aback that it took me a moment to process what she was implying. When I pressed her for an explanation, she sighed and said, Look, your face, it's just too much. I didn't want to scare the guests. There it was, the truth laid out in the most cruel and heartless way possible. She didn't want me at their housewarming party because of my scar, because she thought I looked ugly and didn't fit into the image she wanted to present to her friends and family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was a woman who was living in a house I had given them, out of love and concern for their well-being, and she had the audacity to tell me I wasn't welcome because of my appearance. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I reminded her that the house they were celebrating in was paid for with my money, and that it was my gift to them. She didn't seem to care. She just shrugged and said, That doesn't mean you get to ruin my party. I felt something snap inside me. I had always tried to be patient and understanding, but this was too much. I wasn't going to let her treat me like I was less than human, not after everything I had done for them. So I made the decision right then and there. I told her that if she didn't want me in the house, then she didn't need the house at all. I informed her that the deed was still in my name. I hadn't signed it over to them yet because I wanted to make sure they were settled first, and now I was glad I hadn't. I gave them 30 days to vacate the property. I could see the shock and anger in her eyes. She realized I wasn't bluffing because I stared back at her with the same cold stare. She stood up yelling that I could not take it back. I said I can and I would. She called out for the kids and stormed out of the house, gesturing to Mark to follow her. She said she can't tolerate my tantrums anymore. Well, good for you. Now, get out. I closed the door behind them and broke down. I cried for hours, not just because of what Susan had said, but because of the realization that my son had allowed her to treat me this way. I wondered what kind of man I had raised, that he would stand by and let his wife insult his mother. The pain of that betrayal cut deeper than anything else. It's been 3 days since then. I'm barely able to come out of bed. I can't even comprehend how badly it hurts. It's a tough pill to swallow, knowing you've given so much, only to be met with heartless disregard. But if nothing else, you've shown that you're not just a victim of their cruelty. You're the queen of your own domain, reclaiming control when they tried to strip it away. You did the right thing, OP. Take the time you need to process it all. Hang in there. Update 3. Hi, people. Thanks for the kind comments and for making me feel better. Sorry I couldn't update earlier. I was traveling for community service with my church group. Let me fill you in with further updates. After I was done sulking, I contacted my lawyer and sent them an official 30-day notice of eviction. I expected Mark to crawl back, and he did call, not to apologize, but to talk me out of my decision. He said Susan was upset with my unreasonable demand. I frowned at him. Really? You want to talk about your wife's mood? How about we talk about her cruel words? He tried to defend her, saying she didn't mean it. She was just stressed and didn't know how to express herself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was making excuses for her, trying to downplay the hurtful things she had said. I said that if he truly respected his mother, he would stand up for me, not try to sweep everything under the rug. That's when he started to apologize. He said he was sorry for how things had turned out, and that he didn't want to lose me over this. He begged me to reconsider, to give him another chance. I could hear the desperation in his voice. I shut him down, saying I don't care about his apology. It would have made more sense if he stood up for me right there, when his wife was spitting venom at me, or even earlier when his wife was harboring hatred towards me just because of my scar. He said he would make her apologize and pay for her words. I hung up, saying I don't care. The same evening, he showed up with her. I opened the door and they were in crocodile tears. She sobbed and said, "I'm sorry. Please withdraw the eviction notice." I put my foot down and said, "No, I don't think so." It led to a major blowout. I listed down all the previous incidents of her cruelty, and she defends it, saying, "I didn't mean to hurt you." The bottom line of their argument was, so what, we did it. It doesn't mean you can take away our house. It took a nasty turn when she even spoke trash about my dead husband for not leaving anything for Mark and making them beg in front of me. That was the moment I had it enough. I stood up and yelled, "Get out," and swore never to expect a penny from me. Mark tried to calm her down, but she was far out of line. Then she made the ultimate threat that if I didn't back down, she would make sure I never saw my grandchildren again. She said she would keep them away from me, that I would be cut off of their lives completely. But instead of giving in, I just looked at her and said, "Okay, cool, now get out." She stormed out and Mark followed her, still trying to bring her back to reality. I'm glad to stand up for myself. If she wants to use the children as pawns in her game, it's on her. I'm not going to let her manipulate me with threats. I had to stand my ground, even if it meant losing contact with my grandchildren. I wasn't going to allow her to bully me into submission. Mark continued to reach out, trying to mediate between us, but I shut him away. The 30 days came and went, but she didn't vacate the house. She thought it was a mere threat. I called the cops and registered them as squatters. I told Mark if they didn't vacate, I would make an online post telling everyone that his wife has been squatting at my place. If anything she cares about is her false reputation. They emptied right away. Apparently her pride was fuller than her bank balance. They moved back to their old dingy apartment, which was still higher than their means. One day I got a letter from Mark's daughter, 8, expressing sorrow about being kicked out of the home. So I should give them the house back. The words didn't seem hers, and if it was, then I questioned her upbringing. Susan is raising them as her mini-self. She said she didn't like this apartment and wanted to go back to the house. I feel pity for the young soul. The 2 kids are suffering because of their cruel mother and spineless father. I didn't respond to the letter. I know they won't understand me, at least not now. Hope someday, when they grow up to be sensible humans unlike their mother, they will come to me. Whenever my guilty conscience kicks in for causing trouble to them, I remind myself that they had brought this on themselves. I wasn't the one who had disrespected my loved one. I was just standing up for myself. It's been a few months since all of this happened. I'm not sure if things will ever be normal between us. Maybe Susan will never realize that her pride isn't worth more than her children's comfort and future. But no matter what happens, I know that I've stood up for myself in a way that I never have before. Respect is non-negotiable. It's something that I've come to value more and more as I've gotten older. I'm not going to let anyone, not even my own family, treat me like I'm less than human because of something I had no control over. My scar doesn't define me. My strength and my resilience do. If Susan can't see that, then that's her loss. But I'll continue to live my life with the dignity and self-respect that I deserve. Sorry if I got a little preachy. These words help me get through my loneliness and yearning for family. Thanks for all the love. You've turned a potential nightmare into a testament of personal strength and respect. Sometimes family doesn't get the memo that respect isn't just a word, it's a standard. And if they can't meet that standard, well, they can go live in a cramped apartment with a side of bitter regret. Have you ever had to teach someone a hard lesson with some hard truths? Share your experience with us in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon. And put the chair back where you found it.